Imagine a time when a former leader of the United States, someone who used to be the president, decided to write a letter. He wanted to give some friendly advice to the current president of a country in Africa, but the answer he got back was so powerful and clear that it made people all over the world sit up and take notice. It was like a quiet signal that big changes were happening. In the past, many African leaders might have just nodded politely to advice from powerful Western countries. But this time, one African president, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, picked up his own pen. He had something important to say. Bill Clinton, the former US president, had sent his letter thinking he was helping. What he got in return was like looking into a mirror. It showed him a new reality. President Traoré's reply wasn't angry, but it was strong. It was the voice of a continent that was tired of being told what to do and was ready to speak for itself. This wasn't just a letter. It was a sign that Africa was standing tall, not with fists raised, but with clear eyes and a confident voice. Let's picture the scene. It was a warm, golden evening in Ouagadougou, the capital city of Burkina Faso. The air smelled of dry earth and sweet-smelling flowers. From far away, you could faintly hear sellers calling out their goods. Inside the presidential office, a single lamp shone on a big, polished wooden desk. On that desk was a letter. This letter wasn't just any letter. It came with a special seal that people all over the world would recognize. It was from Bill Clinton. The letter had arrived a few hours earlier, brought by a special messenger. It had the stamp of the Clinton Foundation and was marked personal. The tone of Clinton's letter was careful. It was partly friendly advice and partly a gentle warning. He praised some of the new and brave changes happening in Burkina Faso, but he also said he was worried that the country was moving away from its old friends in Western countries. He warned that being too independent might lead to problems, and that new friends might not always have Burkina Faso's best interests at heart. He wrote something like, "Dear President Traoré, your bravery has made the world watch, but the path you're taking, even if you mean well, might cut Burkina Faso off from partnerships that help countries grow. Please remember, things like democracy, stability, and working together aren't just Western ideas. They are important for all people." Clinton's letter seemed honest, and it came from someone with a lot of experience. But for President Traoré, it also sounded very familiar. It felt like another example of powerful outsiders thinking they knew best for Africa, expecting Africa to follow a path someone else had made, instead of making its own. President Traoré folded the letter carefully and put it aside. Outside his office, life went on as usual. The staff working in the palace had no idea that a big moment of thinking was happening behind those closed doors. President Traoré wasn't angry. Instead, he felt a strong sense of clarity, like he knew exactly what needed to be said. Later that evening, President Traoré sat down with a pen and a plain piece of paper. He didn't ask any assistants to help him write or type. It was just him, thinking about everything he had seen and experienced. He felt he wasn't just speaking for his own country, but for a whole continent that was waking up. He began to write, "Dear President Clinton, thank you for your letter. I see it as a sign of your concern, and I respect that. You have been a friend to Africa for a long time, and I believe you mean well. But please let me speak plainly. Africa is not confused. Africa is not lost. Africa does not need someone else to show it the way. Africa is awake. And now that we are awake, we have made a decision that we should have made a long time ago. We will no longer try to explain ourselves. We will simply state who we are. We will no longer ask for permission. We will simply act." He paused for a moment. He remembered when he was a young soldier, walking through villages. He saw children trying to study by the dim light of a candle. He saw hospitals that didn't have basic things like bandages or medicine. He saw food aid arriving with company logos on it, but with no real understanding of what people truly needed. He remembered standing with women who had survived terrible wars, only to be told by foreign experts that their resilience was improving, as if they were just numbers in a report. He continued writing, "The problem isn't that Burkina Faso is turning away from the world. The problem is that, for the first time in many years, we are turning towards ourselves. And when we do that, we are finding something very powerful. Real progress isn't something that someone gives you. It's something you have to achieve for yourself. You talk about democracy, and so do we, but let's be very clear. For too long, democracy in Africa has just meant having elections, even if people didn't have electricity. It meant having rule books written in languages most people didn't understand. It meant having governments that were watched more by foreign donors than by their own citizens. What we are building now is not a rejection of democracy. We are trying to bring back its true spirit. For us, he went on, democracy means a farmer has the right to water his fields without waiting for a loan from a bank in another country. It means a village school is run by local people, not by outside consultants. It means when we talk about freedom, we don't just mean fancy words. We mean the real freedom to make our own choices, to use our own resources, and to decide our own future. President Traoré got up from his desk and walked to the window. In the distance, the lights of Ouagadougou sparkled. Many of those lights were new solar lights, part of his government's plan to bring electricity to more areas. Down in the street, a group of young men were gathered around a radio, talking about a new government program aimed at making the country less dependent on foreign help. He went back to his desk and picked up his pen again. I understand your worries about new, uncertain allies, but let's be honest, Mr. President. Being certain about old allies hasn't always worked out well for us. That certainty built roads we didn't ask for. That certainty gave us aid that came with too many conditions. That certainty built big embassies where diplomats talked more to each other than to us, the people of the country. What we want now isn't certainty. We want clarity. We want to be clear about our goals, clear about who we partner with, and clear about our own power. And this clarity tells us that no country, not even ours, can grow if it's just borrowing someone else's ideas. President Traoré thought about a recent trip he took to a small town. There, he met a 23-year-old woman named Fatima. Fatima ran a small business with other women. They collected local hibiscus flowers and turned them into high-quality tea that they sold in cafes in Ouagadougou and even in other countries. With a little help from a government fund for small businesses, Fatima's group had gone from just getting by to becoming a successful business. Fatima had looked President Traoré right in the eye and said, "We are no longer begging, we are becoming." That sentence stuck in his mind. He finished his letter, "Mr. Clinton, you once said that the cost of doing nothing is much greater than the cost of doing something. We agree. But our something might not look like what other people expect. It might not follow the old rules. It might not wait for anyone's approval. It might make some people uncomfortable, especially those who are used to telling Africa's story without listening to Africa's voice. But make no mistake, what we are doing comes from a deep love for our people, a great pride in our culture, and a strong belief in what we can do. Africa is not closing its doors. Africa is building its own house. And this time, we are choosing the builders ourselves. With respect, Ibrahim Traoré." A few weeks later, Bill Clinton was speaking at a big meeting at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Someone asked him about President Traoré's letter. Clinton paused for a moment before he answered. "President Traoré's words were honest," he said. "And sometimes, honesty can sting a bit. But that's the kind of leadership the world needs, voices that challenge us, not just agree with us." He then added, "Africa is speaking, and it's time we really listen, not just here, but everywhere." Back in Burkina Faso, President Traoré's reply made a big impact, much bigger than just news headlines. In villages all over the country, people talked about it with pride. In a market in a town called Fodder Ngurma, a shopkeeper said, "This is the first time I feel like my president is not just talking to the world, but he's speaking for us." In a small classroom outside another town called Banfora, a teacher printed out the letter and pinned it on the wall next to a map of Africa. She told her students, "This is what dignity looks like. This is why you must study hard, not so you can leave, but so you can lead." Meanwhile, President Traoré's government was working hard to put its development plans into action. The Minister of Education started a new program to train teachers all over the country, using local languages as the main way to teach. The Ministry of Health made a deal with nearby countries to start making important medicines locally. The Agriculture Department helped more farmers get access to storage buildings for their grain, owned by local groups, which meant they weren't so dependent on big foreign companies. At a public meeting that was broadcast on the radio, President Traoré stood before hundreds of students and community leaders. "I don't ask you to follow me," he said. "I ask you to stand up, not because we reject the world, but because we finally accept ourselves. We welcome help, but not dependency. We welcome friendship, but not being treated like children. We welcome the world, but on our own terms." The crowd cheered loudly. Sometime later, President Traoré made a quiet visit to a workshop in a town called Kaya. A young girl named Asata came up to him and gave him a charcoal drawing she had made. The drawing showed him standing next to a big, strong tree with deep roots that couldn't be shaken. She said, "This is you and this is us. We grow because the roots are strong." President Traoré looked at the drawing, then at the girl. "No," he said softly, "you are the roots. I am just the soil that helps you grow." And all around the world, one thing became very clear. Africa was no longer waiting for permission to be seen or heard. It was showing the world who it was and what it stood for. And in the quiet offices where powerful decisions are made, from Europe to Asia, the message was heard. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was like the strong, steady beat of a drum. Africa wasn't just arriving on the world stage. Africa had arrived.